When Chevrolet added four-wheel disc brakes to the 1965 Corvette as default equipment, their team considered it a straightforward upgrade. Four-wheel discs stopped the car harder and faster than any drum setup, reflecting complete confidence in where braking technology was heading. But not every buyer agreed. Some customers walked into dealerships and flat-out refused the new system, which led Chevrolet to make a quiet arrangement. Swap the discs for the original drum setup and receive a $64.50 credit. Records show 316 buyers took that deal. 316 people paid for a brand new sports car and deliberately asked for older, less capable brakes. Today, those drum brake 1965 Corvettes are collector curiosities precisely because almost nobody wanted them at the time, which makes finding one feel like locating a footnote that somehow survived intact. Arriving mid-year in 1965, the 396 cubic inch big block V8 produced 425 horsepower and never appeared in a Corvette again. Chevrolet replaced it with a 427 cubic inch version for 1966, which meant the 396's window amounted to roughly half a model year inside an already single-year motor run. That stacked rarity on top of rarity in a way that was wholly unplanned. Collectors chasing an original 396 car today are hunting something that existed for a matter of months before Chevrolet moved on, and auction results for authentic examples reflect that narrow manufacturing window. This power plant arrived strong, performed well, and left before anyone could get comfortable with it being there. Fuel-injected Corvettes had taken years to earn their reputation. Introduced in 1957, the Rochester fuel injection system delivered strong top-end power, but it was notoriously finicky and required exacting tuning that made it temperamental compared to simpler carbureted setups, while looking unlike anything else under an American hood. By 1965, though, the new, larger engine made more horsepower at a lower manufacturing cost, and that calculation ended the fuel injection story on the spot. Records indicate 771 fuel-injected Corvettes left the assembly plant in 1965, and then the option disappeared until the 1982 model year. The technicians assembling those final vehicles had no reason to think they were building the last ones in the line, which gives every surviving example a historical weight that was never intentional when they rolled off the floor. The 1963 Corvette wore decorative hood scoops that moved zero air. They existed for visual aggression, not function, and Chevrolet's styling team introduced them for the 1963 Stingray before quickly walking the design back. In 1965, builders stripped them off altogether and gave the car a flat, unbroken hood with no ornamentation. Automotive press coverage from that year noted the cleaner profile as a sign that the Corvette's identity had matured past the point of needing decorative props to communicate performance. This vehicle looked more confident without the fake scoops, and the enthusiast response backed that read. No embellishment, just a smooth surface that let the rest of the machine carry the message. That clean hood story carries one exception. Buyers who ordered the larger new power plant received an altered hood because the engine sat too tall for standard clearance and there was no way around the geometry. Chevrolet's answer was a covering with a raised center section that arched up over the motor block, and enthusiasts assigned it a name almost immediately: the Power Bulge. That moniker held firm enough that technicians and historians still use it today in technical discussions about the 1965 model. This clearance problem generated one of the most recognized styling details of the whole generation, and nobody shaped it to look good. Physics demanded it, and aesthetics followed on their own. Front fender side vents on the 1963 and 1964 Corvettes were purely decorative. Hot air went nowhere. Horizontal slots looked purposeful, but served no mechanical function, which meant the underhood bay ran warmer than necessary. Chevrolet rebuilt them for 1965, switching to 3 vertical vents that actively pulled heat out of the compartment during operation. This functional change also altered the visual character of the car's flanks, giving the 1965 model a cleaner, more vertical appearance on the side that separated it immediately from previous vehicles. Fixing the thermal management simultaneously improved the overall look, without anyone treating it as a styling exercise. Side-mounted exhaust arrived as an available option in 1965, and it changed the way Corvettes sounded on public roads from that point forward. Before that model year, side pipes were an aftermarket modification that buyers sourced independently. Starting in 1965, a customer could order them directly from Chevrolet and take delivery of a car that ran its exhaust down the rocker panels below the doors as an original built-in feature. Tones produced by those pipes became inseparable from the Corvette's character across the following decades, and the visual of chrome exhaust running low along the body influenced American sports car aesthetics well into the 1970s. Tracing the origin point for that full look brings us straight back to the 1965 option sheet. At the 1965 auto shows, Chevrolet's styling team put a concept car called the Mako Shark II on public display for the first time. Archival footage from those events shows large crowds gathered around a shape that bore no resemblance to contemporary assembly line vehicles, featuring low, stretched bodywork that suggested an entirely new direction for American performance machines. The crowds were actually looking at the next-generation production Corvette. Lines from the Mako Shark II translated almost directly into the 1968 iteration, known among collectors as the C3, which stayed on dealer lots for 15 years. That 1965 show tour served as a public preview that almost nobody in those rooms decoded correctly while they were standing there. Taller drivers had a long-standing complaint with the Corvette before 1965. Fixed distance from the steering wheel to the seat suited average height drivers, but created actual physical discomfort for anyone much taller. Chevrolet addressed the problem directly by offering a telescoping steering column as an available option in 1965, letting drivers pull the wheel closer or push it further away within a measurable range. Contemporary road tests from automotive publications that year noted the feature specifically as evidence that Chevrolet had started paying attention to ergonomics in a way that European sports car manufacturers had been practicing for years. Buyers stretching or hunching through every drive suddenly found themselves in a car that accommodated their bodies. When the upgraded power plant hit assembly lines in the 1965 Corvette, the existing tire specification became a liability almost immediately. Power output overwhelmed the contact patch that the stock tires provided, and Chevrolet's team responded by increasing rubber width to match what the engine actually demanded. It was the first time the tire specification on a retail Corvette changed because the mechanics required it, not because a stylist wanted the car to look wider or more aggressive. The physics of routing that much power through an inadequate footprint forced the decision, and the upgrade became default across the lineup, rather than an option that buyers had to select. Power radio antennas existed before 1965. But Chevrolet made one base equipment on the 1965 Corvette rather than treating it as a premium add-on. Using a dedicated switch on the dashboard, the driver could manually control the power antenna, raising or retracting the mast as needed. Road test coverage from automotive publications in 1965 pointed to the feature as part of what gave the car a more finished, polished feel compared to earlier models, where small details like this cost extra. It sits in the category of features that seem minor in isolation, but accumulate into a clear statement about how seriously Chevrolet was taking the overall ownership experience that year. That initial 1965 Corvette to leave the assembly line wore a color that didn't appear anywhere in the official Corvette catalog. Chevrolet applied Cadillac's satin silver finish to that opening unit of the model year and logged it under an internal paint code labeled ZZ. No customer could order that color. Code ZZ covered one specific car, the first one built, and then the production lines moved on to the regular palette without ceremony. Confirmed by researchers who accessed original documentation, Production records show the ZZ designation clearly for that vehicle, and the detail captures something honest about how assembly facilities actually operate. Opening cars off any line carry the fingerprints of the people who built them before an official catalog constrains their decisions. Chevrolet's 1965 Corvette packed firsts, lasts, accidents, and deliberate choices into a single model year, and most car histories skim past all of it. We saw disc brakes that buyers rejected. One motor lasted only half a year. Meanwhile, a concept vehicle quietly transformed into production reality, and the opening unit wore a paint code nobody ordered. Drop the fact that surprised you most in the comments below, and subscribe for more deep-cut automotive history that rarely surfaces anywhere else.